come to my attention, I just can't get past the fact that we are teaching color wrong. Hello and welcome back to the studio. In this video, we're going to talk about the best pigments to put in a limited watercolor palette and how to build your watercolor palette and customize it to your own style, just like a pro. Well, if you've been watching my tutorials for a while, you've probably seen this beastie. This is my large porcelain palette by Meeden, and I love it. It's great for having a lot of different variety in here. It's perfect for somebody who does a lot of tutorials and a lot of education. So I have really enjoyed having this palette to explore, but for the most part, when I'm working by myself, I don't want to lug this thing around. So you better believe I was thrilled when Meeden offered to send me their 18 well palette, much smaller, much more compact, and they also offered to sponsor a giveaway. So 3 of you will be able to win this exact same palette, but we'll talk about that later. Let's get into pigments. All right, so I have a new 18 well porcelain palette, and I do love a porcelain palette. I bought my first porcelain palette to prove a friend wrong and let her know that it didn't really make a difference. Sorry, Emily, I will never doubt you again. Because she was right, and now I exclusively use porcelain palettes. But anyway, let's get on to the colors. There are 2 major schools of thought. One that I think you'll all be very familiar with, and one that might feel like I'm turning tables on you. So if you go to any painting class, any painting school, when they first hand you paint, they'll hand you the traditional primary colors in a warm and a cool. So a warm and cool red, a warm and cool yellow, and a warm and cool blue. For cool colors, you'll probably get something like an alizarin crimson, a ultramarine blue, and like some sort of a lemon yellow. And then on the warm side, cadmium red was popular. I like as an alternative to a cadmium, a Winsor red, a Winsor blue, and then for warm yellow, like a transparent yellow, maybe a quinacridone gold would be a good option for those colors. The idea is by using both warm and cool shades of our primary colors, it really broadens your ability to mix a wide variety of colors. And having been taught this way, it's just kind of how my brain works, and it actually fits really well with my style, my personal color palette. However, there is a fairly new school of thought. I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. Now granted, I'm not like watching a bunch of color theory videos because that's kind of my life. So I don't really feel like I need to watch videos about it. But it's come to my attention, I just can't get past the fact that we are teaching color wrong. Instead of blue, red, and yellow being our primaries, it should be magenta, cyan, and yellow. And I know this not only from my own experience and kind of discovering this over time, but also because that's how printers work. And it's not becoming less like that, and they're not moving towards, oh, we just use like red, yellow, and blue. They're moving more towards it. So my printer actually uses light cyan and deep cyan and light magenta and light yellow. And so we're leaning into it more rather than kind of falling back onto our old ways of thinking. All right, just in case you don't believe me, and I'm not offended if you don't, this is magenta, quinacridone magenta. And we're gonna add this transparent yellow to it. And we're heavier on the magenta than on the yellow. But can you see what color that is? That's a red if I ever saw one. Let's go here to Winsor Red and actually clean off our brush and pull some of this up and just compare the 2. And it is okay to feel offended because I'm gonna be honest, as I was discovering this, I felt betrayed and offended as well. Now, I would say the cyan thing is a little bit less intense than the magenta thing. Here's an example of 4 different blues. So this is ultramarine blue, Indian Throne, Winsor Blue, and Phthalo Turquoise. And I would say either of these 2 would work for what we're going to talk about. The benefit with going with a super saturated blue color, which in this case we're calling cyan, is that it gives you a certain level of saturation that you just cannot get with the other colors. I just cannot get as bright, saturated, almost neon with an ultramarine blue or an Indian Throne as I can get with the Winsor Blue. If your main goal is to get the most bang for your buck, the most variety with the smallest number of colors, you need to make sure that you have a cyan color. That would be kind of your go-to color rather than an ultramarine, because you can't get this level of saturation by starting with a color that is not as saturated as this one. So that's why having more of the cyan color is so important. Oftentimes a default is an ultramarine blue, but you can't get the saturation that you might be going for if you're starting from here. So if I had to guess, now I don't know, we like to be stuck in our ways, don't we? And like I said, it's more comfortable for me to use the traditional method of just the red, yellow, and blue. That's the way that my mind works. But if you want to be the most correct and get the most variety, you'd want to at least include a magenta and a cyan within your color palette in order to get a good mix. And now how would you do that? Now I would recommend adjusting the traditional palette that I mentioned in the beginning in order to include a magenta and a cyan color in there. So if you wanted to work with the 3 warm tone and the 3 cool tone primary colors, I would make sure that your cool tone red is magenta instead of a red. And then I would make sure that your warm tone blue is a cyan or more of a turquoise color. All right, now that we have that base, I'm going to show you how I've taken that base and customized it so that I can still have a limited, easy to use palette, very versatile palette, but I don't have a bunch of colors that I don't use all the time. Now, how you customize it will depend on your personal taste and your personal color palette. So what I work with is generally very soft, very feminine colors. I work with a lot of the natural world. I don't branch into a lot of super saturated or rich colors. I don't even branch into cooler pinks very often. And this actually would be about as cool and saturated as I go in general. I tend to play in more with color relationships rather than saturation. So that's the first thing we're going to look at. We're going to look at this basic palette with our warm primaries and our cool primaries. We've got a magenta, we've got a cyan in here, and we're going to adjust according to our style and according to just our preferences. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take a look at these colors, and if there's one that already you prefer something else, then go ahead and swap that out. So I've been using Winsor Red as an example for a warm red. I think it's a great option. However, I personally prefer and am drawn toward quinacridone red, and so that's what I swapped this out with already. So I've already swapped out a color just because I have a preference for it. Another color that I might swap out, so this is ultramarine blue, and at this point I'm still keeping ultramarine in it. It's still the color that I know the best, and I just like to lean on it. But another one that I would consider is Indian Throne. I love, you can see how deep and dark this is. I love a rich, deeply saturated color. I was tempted to switch these out. I think that they're fairly interchangeable, except if you want to be able to get really deep and dark, this is a fabulous option. So I considered swapping those. I might swap them in the future. The nice thing about watercolor is that you can always adjust it. The other color that you might want to swap is like your warmer yellow. You might want to go a little bit more of like a quinacridone gold or a slightly more orangey yellow. I tend to love a cool yellow anyway, and so I have my lemon yellow and then my warm yellow. While it does get rather warm, I would say it actually is more of like a neutral yellow rather than something that is leans a little bit more mustardy. So that might be something that you want to switch out. I don't know if I mentioned it yet, but for the magenta color, this is quinacridone magenta. Another great option would be like a quinacridone rose. All right, hopefully you don't think I'm crazy because we just spent all this time talking about cyan and blue. I personally would not include a cyan. I never use it. I never use it because my personal style is a lot more feminine, a lot more muted. I wouldn't say super muted, but definitely more muted than this. I just never reach for it. I actually have 2 in this large palette, and I just never go for them. It's just not something that I use. So you can take a look at my artwork, and all of the greens that I use come from an ultramarine or an Indian Throat. They're very easy to get. So instead of having another blue in here, I actually would rather customize my palette with something that I have to mix a lot. So a good example of this would be I would prefer to add a green in. Now you don't need a green, but one of the great things about having all of these watercolor options is that it can make your life easier. So for me, one reason why I would keep this red instead of just having a magenta is because I use this red so much that having to mix it every time I want to use it would be a little bit irritating. I still don't use it straight out of the tube, so I'm mixing with it anyway, but it's nice to start with that base. That's kind of how I feel about green. And so the 2 greens that I would choose from would either be sap green, because it's just been such a wonderful default for me. I love that it's easy to make it a little bit warmer and it's easy to make it cooler. I just find that I have a lot of variety with it, a little bit of that red, and I've got this beautiful desaturated olive tone. I just love the versatility of it. So I would either switch the cyan out for sap green, or I would consider a perylene green. And perylene green would give that to me. It's nice and deep and saturated, and I actually would probably use this instead of a black. Similar to the Indian Throne, it's just so easy to get nice and deep and dark, and for me, having that deep saturation where I'm not having to mix all of these colors and really watch how much water is on the brush, I would go for this. Another great option for like green, for example, I just love green paints. I could just fill this whole thing with green paint, would be a Hooker's green. And so if you're like, I would like green, but I want, you know, like a cooler tone green, Hooker's green is great. It's also great for adding variety in here. It's just that with my palette, I'm just not going for the cool greens as often as I'm going for these warmer tones. Let's just say, for the sake of like an example, that we're trying to limit our colors to 6 or 7. I would keep the magenta because I think that it has a lot more variety in it, and it will help me to mix a bright purple if I want one. I would keep red because, or quinacridone red, because it's my favorite. I'd probably keep transparent yellow, not lemon yellow. They're very similar, and like I said, I'm just kind of a cool yellow kind of girl, and so that's kind of what I would go for. I'd get rid of cyan. I would keep, I don't think you need both ultramarine and Indanthrone, and because this has more saturation and I already got rid of cyan, I'm going to keep ultramarine rather than the Indanthrone. So that gives us 4 colors right here. So now again, I'm going to take a look at the work that I create and think, okay, what would be the next best color? What is missing from in here? And one of the things I think is missing is a deeper value. So I would pick Perylene next. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I technically have room, just with our general rule of thumb, to include sap green. I don't need to because I could easily mix a similar color to sap green, but again, because I do florals and landscapes and even my architecture has foliage in it, I'm going to also add the green. And that's how I take the basics, even though like I know this will give me the most bang for my buck. It gives me the most variety. I can still take this information, look at what I have, and create my own palette based on what I'm actually going to use. Looking at my artwork, how I want to customize it, and how I want to change it. All right, let's add this into the palette. So here is our freshly filled palette. I have quinacridone magenta, quinacridone red. I did end up keeping lemon yellow because I forgot, but you can always take that out. I have transparent yellow, sap green, Perylene green, and ultramarine blue. I just kind of tried to go in color order, and overall I'm just so excited to begin creating with this palette. If you would like to enter our giveaway, there are 3 winners. 1 will be chosen on YouTube and 2 will be chosen on Instagram. So I'll have the Instagram page for this giveaway linked in the description box, as well as a direct link to this palette and to my big one down in the description. To enter to win this palette on YouTube, all you need to do is leave a comment in the comment section down below. I'm also going to link Meeden in the comment section down below. I highly recommend that you give them a follow and stay kind of up to date on some of their new products and some of the things that they're working on. To be entered to win on Instagram, you'll follow the link down below, like and comment on that video, follow both myself and Meeden's accounts. And again, there will be 2 winners from that account. You can, of course, enter on both platforms. So huge thank you to Meeden for sponsoring this giveaway, for allowing me to share some of the products that I really love. I hope that you found this video helpful, and good luck on the giveaway. Until next time, happy painting. Let's get into pigments. So we're leaving.